So good morning, Nigeria. We're reaching you from the NTA, and of course, we're discussing this morning checking influx of firearms in Nigeria and look at the developments in Chad much later. And to prompt our conversation on the subject matter, here is a background report from our correspondent Joseph Watson.
Nigeria's legal system does not encourage possession of firearms by persons other than security operatives and individuals licensed by the police authority. To strengthen the law against illegal possession of arms in Nigeria, the National Assembly has passed for the amendment of the Firearms Act. The Firearms Act Amendment Bill is seeking for increased penalty for offenders. It recommends 10 years imprisonment for illegal possessors, importers, and manufacturers of firearms in Nigeria. It also prescribes a fine of 1 million naira against offenders, as well as stamping of all firearms sold and transferred respectively. But even with the legislation, influx of firearms into and across Nigeria continues to be on the increase. Recent United Nations report says 70% of estimated 500 million of illicit small arms and light weapons circulating in West Africa is domiciled in Nigeria. The enablers of the proliferation of these weapons have been associated to the fallout of the 2011 crisis in Libya, where many fighters fled with arms and ammunition. Conflicts in neighboring countries like Mali, Chad, and Niger, porous nature of Nigeria's borders, and activities of local manufacturing factories. Increasing influx of firearms into and across Nigeria, according to security reports, is greatly fueling and sustaining insurgency, kidnapping, armed robbery, sea piracy, and communal crisis, among other security challenges, leading to loss of thousands of lives. In August 2020, President Muhammadu Buhari approved the establishment of a national center for the control of small arms and light weapons. Despite all these measures taken, Nigeria continues to face proliferation of firearms, threatening the peace and tranquility of the country as well as its sovereignty. Reassessing the factors responsible for influx of firearms in Nigeria and how to mitigate them to curtail the present security challenge is right on the table for guests on Good Morning Nigeria to digest.
Thank you very much, Joseph Olsen, for that background. With us in the studios to discuss this issue, let's welcome our regular guests. First, the Force Public Relations Officer, Commissioner of Police, Frank Umba. Pleasure to have you on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you, Kensley, and good morning, Nigerians.
Also here with us is Dr. Kabir Adamu, who is a security and risk management expert. Dr. Kabir, delighted to have you again this morning.
The pleasure is mine. Good morning, Kikni.
Okay.
And joining us via Zoom is another security expert, as Ona Ehomu. And welcome to Good Morning Nigeria, Ona.
Thank you very much, sir. Thanks for having me. Good morning.
All right. Gentlemen, delighted to have you with us. Perhaps one could begin by asking what, on the face of it, appears to be a provocative question. Because in recent decades, we've been talking about the proliferation of small arms and light weapons in Nigeria. 20 years ago, I recall, during the administration of President Olusegun Obasanjo, there was a national security summit that held at the International Conference Center. The primary focus, of course, was the 2003 elections and the violent build-up to that election. And one of the causative factors identified was the plenitude of small arms and light weapons all over the country. Today, the situation is not any different. If anything, it is worse. Yeah. CP Frank Umba, we see you from time to time when your men and officers have raided and arrested kidnappers, bandits, and other forms of criminals. And the assortment of weapons usually put on display alongside the ammunition, these are enough to frighten any individual. Have we therefore just been paying lip service to the proliferation of small arms and light weapons? Because it appears that the more seizures your men and officers make, the more weapons that we have in different parts of the country. Little kids are said now to be flaunting AK-47, in some cases AK-49. CP Francoba.
Kinsley, I absolutely agree with you that this has become more or less like a perennial problem. The challenges are huge, and if you follow the trajectory of the proliferations, the recovery by security agencies, and I would like to stay with the recoveries by the NPF. The figures sometimes are mind-boggling. And you begin to wonder, just like you, why is it that in spite of the arrests, in spite of the recoveries, in spite of the seizure, in spite of the naming and shaming of these gangsters and syndicates and traffickers, in spite of the persecution, it doesn't seem to be any form of deterrent. The honest truth is that the phenomenon of arms smuggling or trafficking has got both local, regional, and global dimensions. Today, Nigeria is both an originating point, a transit point, and an end location for arms. Is an originating point because we've got some small illegal arm manufacturers dotted across the country, operating covertly. It is a transit point because some of these arms that are locally manufactured sometimes also find their way outside the shores. The criminal elements, because of globalization, have become so intertwined and so interconnected that from Katsina, from Sokoto, they are talking to somebody in Chad, they are talking to somebody in Niger, from Oyo State and Lagos, they are talking to somebody in Benin Republic, they're talking to somebody in Burkina Faso, and vice versa. And so arms now move very easily. Communication, the internet, everything has made it easier for them to communicate and for them to stay in touch. In as much as these tools have also become useful to investigators, to the intelligence community, as we're exploiting these tools to use them to gather intelligence, to do investigations, to take productive measures. The criminal elements are also using those tools at the same time. And the lifespan of AK-47, for example, which has become more or less the iconic weapon for both legitimate and illegitimate groups, for both state actors and non-state actors. The average AK-47 can last for as long as, it has a lifespan between 20 to 40 years. So it makes it easier for it to move round and round and round. It could move from Russia to Congo, from Congo to Libya, down to Nigeria, return again to Libya, return back here again. It's durable, it's rugged, it's easier to maintain, it has perfect longevity. And that's why if you look at the choice weapon for criminal elements, the choice weapon for terrorists, the choice weapon for drug barons, the choice weapon for bandits and armed robbers and kidnappers has always remained the weapons from the AK family, from the Kalashnikov family. So it's a huge problem. You talk about the stretch of our borders. Of course, we all know Nigeria is bordered by about 4 countries: Niger, Chad, Cameroon, Benin Republic. We have a large expanse of water. The littoral states of Lagos, Ondo, Bayelsa, Rivers, and then up to the Gulf of Guinea. We know the challenges we had during at the peak of the militancy problem, where we had ships coming in from the Eastern European countries and swapping our crude with weapons. So, but the good thing again is that we know these things and we are working around the clock to do what we can do, given the challenges, given the difficult ecosystem we're operating, to also deal with that. For now, what the NPF is doing, what the Nigerian Police Force is doing, is we've identified the hotspots for arms trafficking in Nigeria. And the hotspots are majorly the border areas. And today, these border areas are receiving a lot of attention from our men. We've also come to understand very clearly the international dimensions of arms trafficking. And that's why we are focusing on identifying, investigating and dismantling international arms smuggling syndicate. We've done that successfully from 2019 till now. In fact, in one of the syndicates, we tracked them all the way. We followed them all the way from Shaki in Oyo State through to Benin Republic, followed their route up to Ghana, up to Burkina Faso, and picked up every single person involved. We worked with Interpol, we worked with WAPCO. That particular syndicate, we recovered in one single operation 6,000 rounds of AK-47 ammunition, 6,000 rounds. As I'm speaking to you, there are operations going on in Katsina. They have been largely successful. I will not give details. That operation took our operatives all the way from Katsina up to Sokoto. That is also another huge international arms smuggling syndicate. This particular trafficking gang specializes in supplying bandits. And we have made major inroads. Probably in the next 1 week, we'll be speaking to Nigerians about that. So we having clearly mapped out the hotspots, we are putting a lot of resources, a lot of efforts, a lot of intelligence on those hotspots, and they are beginning to yield result. But again, the honest truth is, like, the police, not just in Nigeria, but elsewhere in the world, we have become more like doctors. Doctors that are compelled by the society to treat symptoms of diseases rather than treating the causative agents, rather than dealing with those parasites that are actually throwing up those diseases. We don't have that capacity. We can only deal with the symptoms. And so other governmental agencies, other levels and layers of government must work with us to also deal with those underlying factors that are throwing up these crimes. They must work with us to tackle those criminogenic factors that are throwing up these characters, throwing up the proliferation of arms, driving the demand and supply, making people to see arms possession as a necessity. We must work on this. We must work on those factors. We must restore confidence. We must stabilize our countries. And we must take the lever of power, the lever of control from non-state actors and return them to the state actors and repossess that monopolistic power of the state to exclusively bear arms and control the use of arms in the country.
That monopolistic power of the state, that's a very important issue to look at. And of course, the synergy now between you and other security agencies, another aspect of this very discussion, which we'll be talking about much later. But before we get deep into that, let me first of all congratulate you, at least Kingsley, for appearing. This is the first time he's coming on board on Good Morning Nigeria as Commissioner of Police. Congratulations for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm actually surprised. I thought I'd been here, Kingsley.
No, I don't think he has.
You disappeared.
Kingsley benched me. Actually, Kingsley benched me. So he just called me back from bench.
Okay, now, Kabiru, Dr. Kabiru, I mean, the thing is so much like a mixed-up situation now. So many things are involved in this. It's, local, regional, as Frank Mba said, and of course, has a global dimension. And this means that a lot of people are so much involved, a lot of organizations, a lot of companies, and so many. Do we see this proliferation in Nigeria from the point of view, or from the perspective, or from the prism of us being a very big country, a very huge country with such a huge population, a very wide border, so much so that it becomes so difficult, or rather very difficult, let me be mild a little bit very difficult for Mba and then his men to police it?
If essentially you are asking me about the drivers of the acquisition of small arms and light weapons. There are several drivers that have been identified. One of them is the actors in conflict. They seek ways to acquire these weapons in order to gain some form of advantage over the other side. So studies have been conducted by reputable organizations that show, as an example, there are ethnic and political militias that unfortunately are seeking to arm themselves in order to propagate that interest. So if it is an ethnic militia, a good example is the Farmer Hada violence. As you know, it's divided along ethnic lines. And so studies have shown that each side has sought to acquire weapons in order to propagate their interest. Now, if it's a political militia, quote and unquote, their studies have also shown that either their managers, unfortunately the politicians, or some players from within that mix have also sought to acquire weapons in order to arm their soldiers, quote and unquote, to propagate their objective. We can also talk about traditional reasons. So as an example, if you are a hunter and you want to use your weapons to achieve your objective as a hunter, and then there are several other traditional purposes for which people seek to acquire those weapons. Recently, the desire to protect either yourself personally or certain interests that you, for one reason or the other, that responsibility has come upon you. And we can carry this from the individual to the community level. Self-help groups have emerged from among several communities. I mean, there's no part of Nigeria, I'm sure CP can speak to that does not have one or the other form of either self-help vigilante or some form of other arrangement. Sometimes with the tacit approval of the police, or unfortunately sometimes just some form of arrangement that would now allow them to arm themselves. Now, is that arming legal or illegal? But the reality is that they are arming themselves. And then, of course, you have the criminal groups that, arm themselves to allow themselves to carry out the objectives that they are carrying out. So those are more or less the drivers that would lead to the continuous proliferation of small arms and light weapons. One thing that I would add to CP here, and I hope I have immunity, that he will not arrest me as I leave this place, is the armory of the security agencies themselves. Luckily, and I must thank NTA for this opportunity, I just concluded a research. My consultancy concluded a research, and that's one area that we found out that is not being spoken about enough. Unfortunately, and CP would attest to this, the Firearms Act looks at two areas, 1990, licensing and then armory. Now, what is the integrity of the armory of our security agencies. And unfortunately, recently, that integrity has been shown to be faulty through three means. Number one, you have groups like the terrorist groups that are operating in the Northeast that pillage this armory and through that arm themselves. Then number two, you have the targeting of security personnel. As part of this report, as at yesterday, we have documented 47 attacks in the southeast and south-south, targeting especially the police. And in each of those attacks, we've documented 12 of such policemen being killed. And in each of those attacks, their weapons are carted away. So again, adding to the topic that we're discussing. Then you also have instances where, unfortunately, and this has been documented too. Late Ali Kwara did a lot of documentation in that regard. And then not the immediate past, the previous Inspector General of Police actually issued a statement when he visited the communities between Kaduna and Abuja and changed several police personnel that were deployed there. I'm trying to bring out the allegation that certain officials within the police are also guilty of this illicit, delivery of weapons to criminals. So if we are looking holistically, in addition to, the very comprehensive explanation given by the CP, we need to also add that as some of the reasons why we have weapons proliferation, small arms and light weapons proliferation in Nigeria.
All right, Dr. Kabir Adamu, thanks a lot for your opening salvo. Let's bring in Dr. Ona Ehomo, who is with us via Zoom. Dr. Ona Ehomo, again, this is by way of a metaphor. It appears that Nigeria has entered into an age of local equivalent of mutual assured destruction. If you consider the proliferation of small arms and light weapons. Listen to the explanation by Dr. Kabir Adamu. Persons are resorting to self-help, self-protection. Criminal gangs are also having access to arms and ammunition, and a very detailed explanation, at least to the extent that he could reveal. CP Frank Umba has also indicated the efforts that they are making and are still making to mop this up. But he has captured it in a way that is very significant, I believe, namely that the security agencies, in police in particular, for which he speaks, is seeking to restore the monopolistic power of the state in terms of force of arms. But right now, some studies, as you probably are aware, are already saying that law enforcement agents in Nigeria probably have just 1/10 of the small arms and light weapons that are all over the place in the country. How do we deal with this situation that is so frightening?
Thank you very much, Honorable Kingsley. Good morning. And congratulations also to CP Frank Mba on his recent elevation. And thank you for the good job you're doing trying to secure the country. Well, there are so many things on the table right now. I've been taking notes. I think CP Frank spoke about the intentions of the bad guys and what the police agency is doing in terms of trying to interdict small arms and light weapons. And Dr. Kabir's presentation was majorly on motivation of the bad guys. What's really moving them? What's moving the arms trade? Secessionist movements, terrorism, criminality, those kinds of things. I think I want to look at another dimension. Why don't I look at vulnerabilities? What is making it possible for this thing to happen? Now, CP Frankumba spoke about littoral areas, the border areas. So that's a very big issue there. The fact that the borders are porous, whether the littoral borders or the land borders, they are very porous. And these weapons can just flow in. I mean, it's like a river flowing or magma flowing into this country. Now, we know that the Sahara zone, or the Sahelian zone, if you may, has been a hotbed for trafficking of arms for a millennia. It's been, arms trafficking has been going on there for as long as I've been studying security, which is like over 50 years. So I don't know why anybody is surprised right now that arms are still flowing in from there. I think the problem really, or the issue really is, what have we been able to do to secure that, such that the arms don't flow in from there? So again, that vulnerability has long existed and it is known. So I don't know why we should be surprised, or we should even be consternated that 70% of the small arms and light weapons in the region are domiciled here in Nigeria. Now, I think that that is a very big vulnerability that needs to be addressed because, again, whether from the customs point of view, border controls point of view, intelligence point of view, policing point of view, even military point of view, because this is a national emergency. Now, recently, some generals came out and said that the illegal arms threaten Nigeria's survival, as a nation, that we cannot keep having this, because many states, so go to the motivation argument or motivation presentation by Dr. Kabir, the fact that there are many non-state actors, and now he even documents also 37 attacks on police agencies. Wow. Within the past, sorry, NEPA, but within the past few months, he documents attacks on police personnel for the purpose of seizing their weapons. And so this is, I mean, this is like, we know it's going to happen. It's just a question of time. And so they are arming themselves. These are those who are not able to import weapons. They are sourcing it. It's called local sourcing. They are sourcing it from the law enforcement personnel who they can attack and seize their weapons. So it is really very fortunate that we've come to this very sorry pass. So I want to look at other issues of vulnerabilities. We need to look at, first of all, how are they getting paid for these weapons? So we must look at the financial system. We learned recently that BDCs are involved in laundering money for terrorists in this country. So that should be of great interest to our police agency and to our intelligence agencies. Now, we have the issue of movement. Firearms they don't just, they are not like text messages you send. You actually have to move them physically. We've had stories of container loads of firearms coming into Onitsha and disappearing overnight. And they are all purchased by non-state actors. These are not military or police arms importations. So these are for non-state actors. So this is very, of course, you remember the issue of the 13 containers of rocket launchers and all kinds of weapons that came in sometime at Lagos port, I think 2013 or so. Now, why I'm saying all of this, why I'm referencing this is that we have to look at what is making it possible for these weapons to come into our country, to come and kill our people, and see if we can seal those loopholes. Vulnerabilities are considered windows of opportunity. Let us see how we can seal those loopholes, how we can cover up those loopholes such that these weapons don't come in and continue to cause havoc here.
Oh, well, thank you, Honor Ehomo. We thank you for your perspective and your opening salvo. But CP Frank, you heard what he said. The last thing he mentioned is talking about how do we, get these borders really very well policed in such a way that they don't really be avenues for, shipping or transshipping these weapons across. Bearing in mind, really, that Nigeria, as big as it is, as I asked Dr. Kabir, the hugeness of this country and the long range of borders we have, and looking at the conflicts in various parts of West Africa and the North African side, talking about Libya and the rest of them, even the recent developments in Chad. These are all points and reasons to worry about the proliferation of light arms into this country. How much or how far have you really gone in trying to see to it that such are being, checked in such a way that it doesn't become so much of a menace as it is now, against the background also of the fact that Dr. Kabir mentioned 47, attacks in the southeast targeting police formations and the rest of them. And also not forgetting the fact that you have complicity among your personnel in this regard.
Okay. Clearly, your question now, we've looked at the various components, and I must say this: your reporter who did that background story also did a fantastic job, because he most of the things that we are also talking about now, he identified them. He identified the crisis in Libya, the destabilization of the entire Sahel region, and apart from the destabilization of the Sahel region, and why the Sahel region should be of utmost importance to us is the fact that the Sahel region flows directly into our country, particularly from the northern parts. There is a seamless flow from those Sahel regions into our part of the country. So it simply means that you can practically, and like Dr. Okomu said, arms movement in those areas has been as long as anybody can remember. They move on horses, they move on cows, they move on vehicles, they move on bicycles and tricycles and motorcycles. And again, when you talk of these small arms, these light weapons, a lot of them are also they are easy to be dismantled. You can fold them. You can break them into pieces. You can repack and repackage them. So it makes concealment and smuggling very easy. And then, of course, there was a time when we also had a complete destabilization of the Mano River region. The Mano River region countries of Liberia, Sierra Leone, Guinea, and Cote d'Ivoire at a time was also immersed in crisis. And then we had peacekeepers going there and coming back. I don't want to talk about what happened, but a lot of things equally happened. And then the Ecowas protocol on free movement of goods and persons. I think this is one thing the federal government must look at very critically. When people move, they don't just move alone. When you say free movement of persons and goods, and when individuals move, or when people move, either as individuals or as in groups, they don't just move alone. They move with their chattels. They move with their goods. And some of these goods some of the items might be legitimate, some might be illegitimate, some might be just simply used to conceal the illegitimate goods. And so throughout this movement, so when we talk about policing our border, we need to look at this protocol. I am an apostle of free trade, but even free trade must be moderated. Free movement must be moderated. So we don't tie the hands and the arms of our security agencies just because there's a protocol. Now, having said that, returning to what should be done, we must look. I've already suggested one, and that will require political will to deal with.
If you don't mind, Franco, I know that you're still on Nadabo's question. Let's drill further into the ECOWAS protocol on free movement. When ECOWAS came into existence in 1975, the security situation in West Africa wasn't as horrible as it is today. We're not hearing of the kind of conflicts you are hearing now in Mali, in Niger, in Chad, Chad is not part of it, in Burkina Faso. But we have seen repeatedly how the protocol on free movement of goods and persons virtually has become a problem for us in Nigeria, including, for instance, the advent of herdsmen from different parts of West Africa. That there is the aspect of it relating to transhumans. There are protocols, there are steps that are ordinarily supposed to be followed by these persons, but they are not following those steps. So, if West Africa, and Nigeria, of course, is the most populous country in West Africa, is there a West African police service that is ensuring the policing of, let's say, a borderless West Africa, so that, as you indicated, these goods and chattel that they are moving along the various borders do not now begin to cause problems for us, because we appear to be the end destination for a number of these weapons and the criminalities that we are grappling with.
I think Nigeria just have to take the bull by the horn. The truth is, we are the biggest country in West Africa, the biggest economy, the biggest in landmass and virtually everything. And so a lot of movement are inwards. And whenever Nigeria government try to step in to exercise some control, they virtually, other countries in West Africa virtually blackmail the government. But I think looking at the enormity, the dynamics, and the multi-dimensional nature of this problem, we must be firmer in asserting our sovereignty. We must not relinquish our sovereignty completely to the whims and caprices of any other person. I mean, in everything we do, if you're a regular flyer, as you get on board a plane, when they go through the routine security things, they will always tell you, in the event of loss of cabin pressure, an oxygen mask will drop like this, draw it, cover your nose and breathe normally. If you're traveling with an infant or a physically challenged person, you must fit in yours
First,
before attending to the person. That's simple. That's the basic rule of life. It means you must take care of yourself before you can take care of the whole. So that's it. So we must we must find a way around this. Yes, there is a West African Committee of Chiefs of Police. The successive inspectors general of police in Nigeria have tried to drive that committee, and I have also seen that each time the inspector general of police from Nigeria is not driving that committee, that committee virtually goes into comatose. And so, but these platforms are not enough for us to put these checks, because these are Committee of Chiefs of Police. They are just heads of police formations in their countries, and they don't have that power to make complete policy reversal or policy adjustment. They can only enforce the law, they can only collaborate, they can only exchange intelligence and work together to secure the entire Ecowas sub-region. But we need to do something about this free movement. It's not just about arms, it's not just about human trafficking, it's not just about headers, uncontrolled movement, but we're also talking about drugs. General Mawa-led NDLE, they are currently doing a lot. They will tell you that sometimes the tramadol of this world, the codeines of this world, when they can't get them directly into Nigeria, they ship them into some other countries and then begin to move them in bits into our country. The customs are aware of this, and so there are sufficient reason for us to actually have a second look at this protocol and see how we can adjust it to actually suit the needs or serve better our national security needs.
That's a good advice, really. Kinsley, I mean, we talked about foreign policy here sometimes.
Absolutely. No, that was yesterday?
That was yesterday.
Yeah, we were
That
talking
was
about Nigeria's foreign policy. Yes, and I'm sorry to jump in here, because the more CP Franco Ba was explaining this, the more it was just occurring to me. The same way we have seen Nigeria has struggled for many years to try to attain self-sufficiency in rice production. In the meantime, neighbors that their population is not anywhere close to any one of 2 or 3 states in Nigeria, they import rice that they probably cannot finish in 50 years, seeking therefore to undermine our own local production efforts, and so on and so forth. But this whole idea of having free movement and working towards integration, and we are playing Big Brother. In the meantime, Big Brother is bleeding to death.
The Big Brother thing is the issue I'm trying to raise
right,
here.
No, please
and
proceed,
of course,
yes.
truly, when you look at it, especially Dr. Kabir, looking at the Ecowas protocol on free movement of goods and services and Nigeria's foreign policy as such, Frank Mba pointed out the fact that, as the Hausama will say, which means love is love, but loving oneself is the first rule. Now, looking at that, should we really continue to go as Big Brother, and then looking at, not forgetting about the fact that we are being at the receiving end? Kinsley alluded to the fact that we have that in mind, and then the rice issue was a big example for us. We closed our borders, we had things going, and things were moving. But we had uproar all over the world, all over the places, especially in West Africa, that we should open our borders, which of course we started doing that. The protocol, is that really worth it?
I'm going to play the devil's advocate, and just so that at least we get another perspective to this. Everything we've said, I mean, we can't be, more right than right. Self-love is paramount. You have to start from that point of view. But then what is self-love? There's a perspective that says the challenge is not free movement of goods and services. The challenge is the weakness of our institutions. Okay. EU has almost the same policy in place. In fact, even broader than what Ecowas has. Their economic integration has advanced above what the Ecowas economic integration protocols are. And in fact, that is the new way of the world. Communities coming together, countries coming together to facilitate a lot of things. So that perspective sees the challenge as the weakness of our institutions. And to bring it back home to the issue we are discussing, which is weapons proliferation. Like I said, I just finished a research, and the finding was mind-boggling. The most conservative estimate of weapons in circulation puts what we have in Nigeria as 6.5. And this is based on a small and light weapons index that was done in 2018. Now, of that 6.5 million in circulation, that same study says these state security agencies have only 586,000. So to put that in perspective, what it means is that there are more than about over 5 million weapons in the hands of non-state actors. What am I trying to say? I'm trying to paint a picture of the weakness of our state institutions. Now, if the law enforcement agencies have only 580 and they are battling non-state actors that have over 5 million, I mean, where is the hope? So I'm sure CP Frank Mba will understand where I'm coming from. His men go out there to confront non-state actors that have weapons over and above what his men have. And that's the reality that we have today. So to take it back to your question on Ecowas protocol, I don't think the challenge is that of Ecowas protocol. In fact, using the Ecowas body as an example, as far back as 2008, there was a moratorium by Ecowas advising member states to set up an arms commission. Nigeria is the only country out of the commission, out of the ECOWAS, not to set up that commission. Again, pointing to the weakness within our institutions. So again, playing the devil's advocate, I do not think the challenge is that of ECOWAS Protocol on Free Movement. I think it's one of the capacity of institutions in Nigeria. You've asked a question around quote-unquote corruption, around officials, especially those manning our borders, and to an extent even policing elements. Now, again, when these people moving from other parts of ECOWAS into Nigeria come to the border, what kind of arrangements do we have in place to document them? Because I'm aware that the ECOWAS protocol requires documentation within the time of arrival to 3 months. Now, do we actually do that? I engage sometimes these people who move around selling stuff. Some of them are from Niger, and they've adopted Nigerian nationality. Is it their fault or the fault of the institutions that are unable to document them? So again, playing the devil's advocate, I think we should be a bit more broad in terms of the analysis that we're doing. Yes, these protocols are there to stay. Frankly, there is not much we can do to change them. What we can do is to strengthen our institutions so that what they are supposed to do, they do. We cannot reverse. I don't think the economic integration issue is something we can reverse, but we can strengthen our institutions.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Kabir. In the law of international institutions, to which you have alluded, when you say that integration is the way to go, citing the example of the EU is talking about legitimate activities. And the EU itself, I'm sure you are aware, also deals with the major challenge of human trafficking, especially from East European countries into former Western European countries. You've also said, oh, well, ECOWAS recommends the establishment of commissions and so on and so forth for dealing with proliferation of small arms and light weapons. The view is uniform amongst our guests today, and indeed amongst informed analysts elsewhere, that the weapons in circulation in West Africa are coming from conflict areas. Do you have an idea of the roles being played by these other nationalities in dealing with the problems of light arms and small weapons in their territory, or when those light arms and small weapons are making their way through their territory, through the corridor, taking advantage of the free movement protocol, and then ending up in Nigeria?
Thank you, Kisley. A very interesting question. Now, if we look at a country like Niger, to be very frank, we cannot suggest that officials in Niger are complicit. Rather, it's the same challenge that we have, one of institution, due to the nature of the vast land in Niger and unfortunately the weakness of the institutions there to police their borders and also to prevent illicit trade in several things, like CP Frank has mentioned, drugs, weapons, even human trafficking as an example. So these routes are age-old routes that unfortunately are being exploited by these criminal gangs and sometimes even terrorists, sometimes with or without the complicity of officials of those states. But what I think is absolutely important is the need for cooperation within ECOWAS member states, so that at least where we have these weaknesses, like the Niger example that I gave, member states strengthen those weaknesses in their own interest. Because whether we like it or not, we're neighbors, and frankly, we can't change that. Chad is a good example. The circumstances in Chad, it may not be directly an ECOWAS issue, but it will affect ECOWAS. So is it in our interest to fold our hands and watch, or we should now work actively to prevent an escalation of the conflict? So to answer your question directly, Kingsley, again, I don't see complicity by officials, rather the issue of weaknesses of institutions. It's one common factor that cuts across the West African sub-region, but I think the issue is more with Nigeria, as unfortunately the Corruption Perception Index seems to portray. Several aspects of our institutions indicate that unfortunately that regulatory essence, I talked earlier on about our armories. We need to look at that issue closely. If we have armories whose integrity are questionable and in doubt, then no matter how well we address this issue, unfortunately, it will still come back to us. Because frankly, if the integrity of that armory is not good, even if you mop up the weapons, like CP has told us that in his open remarks, those weapons will still go back to the public. Another thing that I think is absolutely important that we address, CP said there's an infinitesimal quantity of local fabrication Unfortunately, my research has shown otherwise. The level of local manufacturing, especially the fabrication of AK-47 and incidentally AK-49, is a bit beyond what we have comprehended. So again, I think that's something the police may have to do, go out and document this local fabrication of weapons. Not too long ago, I think it was in Kaduna, and I'm sure CP will tell us more about that, they intercepted a movement of locally fabricated AK-47. We saw it. I saw it on NTA News at 9. Locally fabricated AK-47.
Well, in a sense, Nadabo, that should be alarming, but it should also be heartwarming.
Exactly.
Because it means that there is a potential. It means that there is a, CP Franco, I'll give you a point, there is a potential for getting into arms production, which is a highly regulated business. At that, okay, there may be government corporations elsewhere in the world, but no government goes directly into arms production. You have companies, and then those companies are regular. You have inspectors who will go in there to check when you get your raw materials, your pipes, your rods, XYZ, you record them so that they will know which quantities you have produced and which quantities you have also sold and to whom. And then you must have a license. If there are countries that you're not supposed to sell to, you don't sell to them. Otherwise, you will be endangering security.
That is where the institutions thing come into it. Strengthening the institutions give us, greater leverage in trying to attempt this.
And as part of the recommendation in this survey that I told you I just concluded, I am suggesting a controversial issue, but I'm seeing the bigger picture, which is what you are saying. We have relatively non-productive defense industry. How do we make this industry a bit vibrant? And I'm suggesting, controversially, that we should decriminalize this local fabrication of weapons so that we use that period of decriminalization and advocacy to document them. And then once we document them, we now make all of these things that you suggested. The weapons are serialized. You know who fabricates what. There is a number to it, and then that allows policing, so that once there is an incident, you can now use forensic investigation to say where did that weapon come from, what kind of ammunition was
God bless you. CP Franco, you were itching to say something.
Yes.
But briefly as such.
Okay. I wanted to say something concerning the Ecowas protocol and then back to the controversial arms thing. Yes, his points are strong and very convincing, but I still believe that we must have a second look at the protocols. The EU, for example, that he used as an example, even in the EU, there are conditions under which a country, once you don't meet certain standard, you are denied certain rights. And so if we must even strengthen the institutions, we must have some stick and carroting system for you to enjoy the protocol on free movement of goods and persons. So if, for example, we discover that repeatedly Niger Republic or Burkina Faso or Togo, this country is repeatedly creating rooms for free flow of illicit weapons or drugs into a particular country and putting institutions under that particular country under so much strain, under so much pressure, there must be way of piling pressure on country B. There must be way of denying them certain incentives and certain benefits and advantages in order to beat them into the line. You don't just make a protocol and it becomes there forever, and there are no, there must be how do I want to say something? Benefit and burden as a necessity must go together. For you to enjoy the benefit of this protocol, you must be prepared to also take the burden that qualifies you to enjoy the benefit. Having said that, I totally agree. I in my mind, I think what we're trying to do with the modular refineries, we should also be thinking of developing a policy guideline for local arms manufacturing. Apart from DICON, I don't know any other company in Nigeria that is manufacturing weapons. So, what we've seen in our interceptions, in our investigations, we've seen people manufacturing pistols that are so beautiful. Okay. You pick them up and they look almost exactly like the Beretta pistol. We've seen them pick up, manufacture local AK-49. They might not look as beautiful as the AK-49 if AK-49 look beautiful. They might not look
It's deadly.
They might not look as beautiful as AK-47 if they ever look beautiful. But
Again, deadly.
but they are very effective.
Okay.
They use the same ammunition. Their firing range might not cover that distance, but they are as effective, as deadly, and as wicked as a Kalashnikov.
Right.
So we must find a way of taking these talents
Yes.
from the illicit world,
Absolutely.
laundering them legitimately, and bringing them into the legitimate
Much
world.
earlier, there used to be the joke. It wasn't a joke, really. The blacksmiths, those around Oka and some other parts, we used to fight local wars, let's not forget. And this is where some of the local weapons were fabricated. So that kind of local talent can still be harvested. Yeah. We want to go very quickly back to Dr. Ona Ekwomo. Dr. Ona Ekwomo, sorry, you were screaming NEPA in the course of your presentation, and we had to stay with you even in that darkness to highlight the fact that your silhouetted image was as a result of the fact that one of the discos, had dealt you a cruel hand. But can we? I'm sure you've had the benefit of listening to the other two guests. What would be your closing thoughts on this, or suggestions as to how we can deal with this influx? And by the way, once weapons are decommissioned, they can also be turned into beautiful things. I've seen furniture made out of decommissioned weapons in the London Museum.
Well, thank you very much, Honorable Kingsley. I think we've had a beautiful conversation this morning. I still want to see a little bit more beef on the plate in terms of how we are going to solve this problem. Because what we're describing elements of the problem, but I don't see any solution. I don't see prescriptions, including myself as a discussant. I think I'm only looking at elements of the problem. But I want to tell you a big one that's bothering me right now. The crisis to the north of Nigeria, that's outside the country, the one in Chad, the assassination of the president. And I believe there were reports yesterday, I have not been able to confirm them, that there is more turmoil in that country. I think that is something that should engage the minds of our thinkers and strategists right now, because Chad had been a very important ally in the war against Boko Haram. Chad is an important trafficking route. It sits in the Sahara. It's an important trafficking route for arms coming into Nigeria. So what Debbie had been doing there, creating a firewall, if he did, but I mean, let's just assume he did from a policy point of view. What Debbie had been doing there is going to go away. Now the country is sliding into a little bit of crisis, political crisis, and we don't know what is the true strength of fact. The people who killed Mr. Debbie, what is their true strength? Whether they are in fact the ones now doing all that gunfire in N'Djamena. So there's a lot that's unknown here. So my thing is, first, how is it going to affect our war with Boko Haram? And more importantly, the influx, the heavy influx of small arms and light weapons that we're going to see. Because we can draw a straight line from a network analysis point of view. We can draw a straight line right from Libya down south into Borno State, and voila, here goes a lot of illicit weapons to come and kill Nigerians here and prosecute the war for Boko Haram, ISWAP, Al-Qaeda, whatever you want to call them. They are all the same 10 and 10 pence. So what I'm trying to say here is that I am very worried about that. In fact, I didn't sleep well last night, just dreaming about the problem of what is the instability in Chad how it's going to affect us. And if you're looking for a problem, I told you, focus on the vulnerabilities. Because if you can close the loopholes, you see, vulnerabilities are important because we say in security, we say that a vulnerability is a condition that a threat can exploit. A threat can exploit, yes, to compromise or an asset being Nigerians, our lives and stuff, our military, our police people who are being killed. Now, what are the threats? The threats in this case is AK-47, illicit weapons, and the actors, the bad guys carrying these weapons around. So the point here now is, how do we seal this vulnerability, this specific vulnerability now, the Chadian one, because that's a very big one. And of course, once a weapon lands in Maiduguri, it can flow anywhere into the country, it can flow west to the northwest, can flow south to my Edo state and all that. So we don't need that. Or it can even flow to the separatists in the southeast. So we don't need that. So let us really, I believe the military authorities, they are studying this right now. And certainly the police agency, and I'm glad that the spokesman is here with us, the police agency will really look at this right now, because this is a big threat. It's coming in, and it's going to come in, let me tell you. And so we cannot do the politics of Chad Republic, but we can at least create a better firewall, because the guy who was creating the firewall for us has been removed. And we can create our own firewall to dam those weapons from coming in.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Onai Homu. There, that was a security expert really talking about influx of firearms in Nigeria. And of course, we've got to round this discussion right here. And then thank you so much, Homu, once again for being part of that program, part of this program, really. Dr. Kabiru Adamu, it's our pleasure. We thank you so much.
Thank you, the pleasure.
CP Frank Ba, it's our pleasure you've been with us.
Well, thank you, and God bless Nigeria.
We thank you so much for watching this very segment. We shall be back in a moment with another segment, and that's going to be talking about the death of the Chadian president. And with that, we try to run the program much later in the day. Thank you so much.
All right, you are watching Good Morning Nigeria live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. As we indicated, we have a second topic, which already, of course, commenced as we were rounding off our first conversation. With the world waking up to the sad news a couple of days ago of President Idris Deby of Chad. He was said to have been mortally wounded on the battlefield against rebels in his country, just about 24 hours after he was coasting to victory in that country's presidential election. World leaders, of course, have been sending their condolences to Chadians and indeed other friends of that country. One of those, of course, who've sent condolence messages is Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari. The son of Idris Deby has now been named as the head of the government for the next 18 months with a military council, although there are indications that rival groups are up against that appointment. So, Nadabo, we have with us in the studios to discuss this issue right now.
Yeah, truly speaking, we have, Ambassador Dauda Danladi, former Secretary to the Government of Borno State, to really look at this issue in the next maybe 10 or so minutes. Welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much.
So, Ambassador Danladi, what's happening, in your opinion, in Chad?
Well, really, having had the opportunity to serve as Secretary to Government in Borno State before my appointment as an ambassador, we had a very close fraternal interaction with Chad. Borno, N'Djamena is just, could be said, is another city extension of Borno State. What has happened in Chad is quite unfortunate. It has left a very big gap, because if you just take a cursory look at Chad has been the heart and the center, epic center of various crises, conflicts in West Africa and, of course, in Central Africa. Chad has been a major contributor to our multinational joint task force. Idris Deby, over the last 2 decades, when he came to power, has been able to build a guerrilla ragtag army into a formidable fighting force, well equipped. When they deployed their troops to the amazement of especially people in Borno State, they came in with heavy equipment, armored personnel carriers, not hillocks. And they came up with good logistics and communication equipment, and they contributed immensely. And as you can see, last year, when Derby led the troops, they were able to clear Boko Haram and ISWAP fighters, insurgents in the Lake Chad Basin. As you know, the Lake Chad Basin has been a sanctuary to about 200 IDPs, and it's also 200,000 IDPs. And at the same time, it has given the Borno State government, and in fact the federal government, the impetus to relocate, to resettle people in border towns of Damasak and Dikwa, which are border towns to Chad. Now, in the Sahel, Chad is also a major contributor to the G5 countries with about 1,200 troops. It has contributed in curbing the infiltration of remnants of ISIS and Al-Qaeda fighters to the Arab Maghreb. Again, Chad is also a major contributor to the United Nations Stabilization Force in Mali to ensure the fight against militia groups and insurgents in the Arab Maghreb. So the demise of Idris Deby has left a very big vacuum because even internally, Chad has been able to stabilize the northern part of Chad from rebel incursions who are based in eastern Libya. These are his tribesmen who really assisted him in the 1990s when he came to power. They have their own different agenda. Again, the Sudan, South Sudan, and Darfur, Chad played a very key role in the quest for peace in that region. And Chad was overwhelmed with refugees, about 450,000 refugees, mostly from Darfur, mostly some of them from Sudan, and even Nigeria and Niger. So the issue now is that with the complex situation unfolding now in Chad, and with the palpable tension, already the United Nations and other international organizations, humanitarian workers, are fleeing Damasak and Dikwa, and by extension, it will hit some of the border towns like Bongono, Baga, because the flanks, there is this fear that the present military council may be forced, based on the dictates of the situation, to withdraw troops operating within the Lake Chad Basin, as well as the Sahel region, so that they can reinforce to control, to ensure the sovereignty of Chad from the incursion of the rebels, which means the flanks will be open. And the implication of that is that Boko Haram and ISWAP warriors will now have will have no cause to worry. They may consolidate their base in the Lake Chad Basin, where they'll be launching attacks on towns, military bases. And if that is left to escalate, and if that extend and affect the relative peace that we have in southern Nigeria, southern part of Nigeria, then Nigeria will be facing an existential threat.
Your Excellency, the picture is gloomy, it looks like, and it's getting gloomier looking at developments in Chad in the past 24 hours. If, when the leadership of Chad has been transferred to his son, Muhammad Kaka, and reports have it overnight that there were some, disturbances in the presidential villa around that area and the rest of them. And the picture you painted is that bad. And of course, look at what's really happening. I mean, what does that pertain to the fight, against insurgency in that flank of Nigeria and of course the southern Chad?
I think this calls for a very decisive action. I believe that the new service chiefs, the military high command, and the government of Nigeria will have to rise up. They will have to see how they can adopt new strategies. They need to deploy, possibly massively, new equipment and troops to support the multinational task force so that they can consolidate the relative peace that has been achieved in the Lake Chad Basin. Similarly, within the Sahel region, possibly the African Union and international partners, especially France, they may need to step in to ensure that this does not create a dicey situation that would deteriorate, given ISWAP and other militia groups the impetus to embolden them so that they can now continue to perpetuate atrocities against the Sahel region and other countries in West Africa. So I think there should be a red alert if none has been done. Government must issue, the military high command must issue red alert. They must be on top of the situation and they must monitor closely developments in Chad. I think one interesting thing that needs to be pointed out is that the appointment of the former service chiefs into ambassadorial appointments and posting of these former service chiefs to the contiguous states to Nigeria, I'm talking about Chad, Cameroon, Niger, and Benin Republic. To a large extent, perhaps this is the time now for them to quickly to ensure that they present their letter of accreditation so that they can really contribute in mobilizing these countries. Because within even the multinational task force, truly, it is only Nigeria and Chad that are actively combatants fighting ISWAP and Boko Harams. Yeah. The other states seems to be preoccupied with their internal crisis.
Happily, the current Chief of Defense Staff, General Leo, that's LEO, Lucky Rabo, was a commander of the Multinational Joint Task Force. I mean, he was in Maiduguri and then, of course, moved to N'Djamena as head of the Multinational Task Force. So your call on a red alert, obviously, is something that will sit very well with the military high command in Nigeria, I believe, Nadabo. Yeah. But there's something that I would like you to also speak to very briefly, if we have this. If for over 4 decades or thereabout, Chad had been in crisis, at war. Hussein Habre, Idris Deby, he himself, he shot his way to power. You know, it seemed that stability or self-preservation was more important than real democracy itself. And then, of course, we have... So Chad had always been a very unstable environment. And the crisis amongst in its neighboring countries, Libya, following the fall of Gaddafi and the Sudan, have also tended to add to the instability in that place. They also have their own ethnic issues. Getting his son to succeed him even for 18 months, and somebody can make a projection to say after 18 months, since they say they want a civilian to take over, he shares his uniform and then becomes the civilian head of state. Is this likely? Because there are voices of dissent already about his appointment. I would like to see some stability in terms of the leadership of the country. Because if there's stability, then of course, perhaps every other thing else will hold. But if there's instability, then the bad guys, as the saying goes, might take advantage of it. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think, you see, you have to go back again into this, back into the 70s. Really, the late Gaddafi had a role in the instability of Chad because he was funding the major tribe, the Chadian major tribe that were located in the eastern part of Libya. He had an ambition. A particular region in Libya is rich in uranium, and he had this ambition of having a nuclear power. So he was really funding and arming the Chadians in the eastern part of Libya with the hope that, and with the assurance that the agenda of carving out a territory out of Libya will be a reality, and then he can have access to that rich region. But unfortunately, the international community put pressure on him, and he publicly denounced that move. Right now, what is happening is that Field Marshal Khalifa Haftar appears to be funding the rebels who are stationed again in eastern Libya, because Haftar is he controls almost the entire eastern part of Libya, and he too has his own agenda. So it is a very dicey situation, a situation whereby this young man, 37-year-old, really a little bit inexperienced administratively and politically, there could be power tussle in Chad. Ordinarily, if they were to go by the constitution, the Speaker of the Parliament would have been, would have been sworn in, and of course he would have laid the grounds for an interim government and towards election. So I think what is most important is that Nigeria must be on her toes. Nigeria must be alert. Nigeria must mobilize the other countries within the region to make sure that the situation does not escalate.
So we thank you so much, Ambassador Udoda Lady, former Secretary of the Government of Borno State. It's our pleasure.
Thank you very much.
And of course, that was Good Morning Nigeria for you today. We thank you so much for being part of it. I am Yusuf Nadab Usman.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolo. Program returns tomorrow, same time, 7 o'clock in the morning.